we'd feel it perfectly okay for someone to have broken into a concentration camp to free people or to damage the torture equipment used by the Nazis. And, you know, we see the torture and imprisonment of animals in the same light. And I think if you look at it like that, it would seem probably that our activities are much too lenient rather than being extreme in any way.
These are the so-called activists. To some, they're a group of harmless, if misled, animal lovers. To others, they're a growing menace. In the last 10 years, the Animal Liberation Front has caused more than £25 million worth of damage and had more than 130 supporters jailed. A survey carried out this summer revealed that 1 in 5 of Britain's young people now claim to support the ALF's extreme methods.
We're a small cell of the Animal Liberation Front. The Animal Liberation Front is a national organisation which carries out illegal acts to rescue animals and to cause financial hardship to those who abuse animals.
Why don't you take off your balaclavas? Wouldn't that be the ultimate act of courage and bravery?
No, because I can't. I cannot rescue animals while I'm doing 5 years in prison, which is what would happen. I prefer to take off my balaclava. I prefer to expose myself as an average person on the street and look you in the eye and speak to you like. I don't really want to threaten in this outfit, but I'm forced to take these measures because if I expose my identity, the corrupt legal system would imprison me for my views.
But ultimately, you're undemocratic and you're prepared to break the law. Isn't that the case?
There is no democracy as far as animals are concerned. It doesn't exist. Animals don't come into the democracy.
But the fact is, every other political movement, if it seeks to gain support, if it's a mature political movement, will do so through ordinary, law-abiding methods. You seem to reject that. Isn't that a very extreme, even fascist kind of behaviour?
It doesn't work. We can't operate within the law because the law doesn't work for animals.
On this planet itself, without humans, the animals and the environment would thrive. The populations would get healthy, things would really change. But without animals, humans would die. We can't live without the animals out there. So in a lot of ways, animal rights is a human issue. You are helping humans by defending animals. Now, a lot of people don't see that because they don't understand that connection. But there is a deeper connection because of the intricate connection that life has that keeps life in that, some people call it the circle of life. What keeps biodiversity alive is every single creature, every single plant, everything on this planet has a place. So by protecting those things, you're protecting humans.
To introduce our guest today, legendary animal rights activist Jonathan Paul, an original member of the Animal Liberation Front, who sacrificed everything toward the abolition of animal exploitation and for the welfare of our planet. Jonathan Paul was sentenced in June of 2007 to 4 years and 3 months in prison for his involvement in the destruction of the Cavel West Horsemeat Slaughterhouse in Oregon, a company that killed 500 horses a week. He was incarcerated in a medium security prison in Phoenix, Arizona, and was deemed a danger to society by the federal agents. Jonathan was arrested also back in 2005 as part of the Green Scare, when federal agents detained 10 activists connected with both the Animal and Earth Liberation Front. Jonathan received the harshest sentence in proportion to any other indicted activist because he refused to reveal the names of the individuals involved in exchange for a reduced sentence. He therefore served 14 extra months for not cooperating with the government. For 2 decades, Jonathan, through the Animal Liberation Front, liberated dogs, cats, monkeys, mice, and rabbits from research labs where they were held in tiny cages to be surgically operated on, often without anesthesia. In 1990, Jonathan spent a year documenting the horrific practices of fur farms around the country. Posing as a legitimate buyer, he purchased a fur farm in Montana and rehabilitated over 65 minks, 2 Canadian lynxes, and 2 bobcats, and then released them back into the wild. In 1995, he co-founded the nonprofit Sea Defense Alliance, which seeks to stop the annual shark hunt in the waters off Santa Cruz, California. Between 1987 and 1992, Jonathan organized the U.S. Hunt Saboteurs, which focus on trophy hunting of bighorn sheep, bears, cougars, bison, and tule elk. Jonathan is also the founder of Ocean Defense International, America's Whale Alliance, and Global Investigations, in which the first documentation of fur farms was done within the US. Jonathan sits on the board of advisors for the Civil Liberties Defense Center, a law firm dedicated to supporting activists from all political movements. Jonathan has committed his life to ending the suffering and killing of animals and protecting the ecology of the planet. He is a hero in every sense of the word, and I'm so grateful that he has agreed to come on the show and share his story, his experiences, his wisdom with all of us. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here, Jade.
Well, I'm so thrilled. I did run after you for quite some time because I absolutely want to interview you. I mean, you're someone that I respect so much for everything you've done, all the sacrifices you made in your life for the sake of animal rights. And you, in my opinion, exemplify everything that an animal rights activist should embody. And so it's a great honor to be able to interview you today. But before we get into the gist of our topic, and we're going to talk about your time with Animal Liberation Front, a lot of the animal testing that happens in laboratories still to this day. I mean, this is a practice that continues. We're going to talk about your environmental work as well. But before we get into all that, I always like to have a little bit of a background note on our guests. So if you wouldn't mind letting viewers at home know a little bit more about your upbringing and what led you to, become an animal rights activist as we know you. So where were you born and raised, for example?
Well, I was born in New York City back in 1966, so I'm an old timer. I grew up in a good family. We moved to the New England area and lived out in the country. So I think there is where I started getting a real appreciation for the natural world around me. I have 2 sisters, 2 twin sisters, which I always joke. That's why I'm so, I have twin sisters,
Younger?
They're older. So that's,
they're older.
They're older. Yeah. I'm the young one. So,
the baby.
That's why I will say I'm so damaged, right? Because I have my 2 older twin sisters always going on me. But so I grew up there, and was really just a typical kid. I was kind of a troublemaker too in my own ways.
Yeah.
But,
a little bit of a rebel, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit of a rebel, and I guess I kind of turned that into some good use later in life. But so it was. I think it was. It was really around then that I really started. I had this fascination with cheetahs when I was in 1st grade. I mean, I freaking love them. They're like my favorite animal ever.
I know.
Yeah.
They are mine. I love cheetahs. They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
They're absolutely gorgeous.
They're a wonderful animal. And it's, the interesting thing was when I was young, I had the privilege to go to Africa and see the wildlife there in Kenya and Tanzania. I've actually been there twice in my life. I went back a little later in life, but and I saw cheetahs in the wild.
Oh my God.
And then, which was an amazing experience for me. And I was 10 or 11 at the time. So, the thing was, when I got back into the States, I went to a zoo and I saw a cheetah in a cage, and it was just pacing back and forth, back and forth. And I had the honor to be able to see this magnificent animal in the wild, and then suddenly see it in the cage. It really started the beginnings of my how I thought towards or thought about other life forms, other animals.
Yeah,
So that was a
absolutely.
big turning point for me.
Was that part of a school trip that made you go to Africa, or?
No, it was a family. It was my father always
Okay.
wanted to take me because I was fascinated with cheetahs, and he took us for a trip there. So he was on business in Europe, and so
Wow.
we were close by. This was like 1973. It was a long time ago. I did go back
Wow.
again when I was 18 after I graduated high school. I'm a photographer also, so I did go back when I was 18 and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and also cheetahs again and lots of wildlife. And it was just as an older person, someone who was 18, I was already vegan at the time.
Oh, wow.
It was a fascinating experience for me to see wild animals in a different and more mature headspace for an
Yeah.
18-year-old. You know, so
And was like, were your parents supportive of your love for animals? I mean, were they animal lovers themselves, or?
well, it's interesting because my dad, who was a wonderful man, he passed away in 2004, but he was a Republican banker. He was very conservative in some views, but he loved animals. I mean, we had a farm. Now, he wasn't a vegan per se, but he, for instance, some ducks got into the swimming pool and they got into the drain, and he tried to do mouth to beak resuscitation to save them and stuff. So,
Wow.
you know,
Had a
he
heart.
had that kind of.
Yeah.
He didn't really connect he was old school, right? He was born in the late 20s, so
Yeah.
he didn't really connect the issue between what's on your plate and what's running around your backyard. He did
Like
he just,
many, like many,
yeah,
like
many.
yeah.
It's more understandable for his generation, though. It's more understandable to have that distancing it from his generation. Now I think it
Absolutely.
should be, yeah. So, it was good. So, and also, my mom's English. She's from Britain, so I'm half
Oh,
English. So maybe that's where some of that animal rights spirit comes from. But
yeah.
my cousins lived in England, and we used to hunt all the time. And I can't unsee some of the stuff that I did, some of the cruelty that I inflicted on animals as a young man, my early teens. And that was a big factor in my changing of how I perceived other creatures on the planet.
Absolutely. I mean, it's we're a product of our environment and our upbringing. And
Yeah.
so like if your parents don't know any better, I mean, I'm not judging my own parents, we're not vegan. But
Right.
in my case, I was lucky because a friend of mine, her sister was part of PETA. I mean, I'm old school too.
Uh-huh.
Like I way back in the day.
Yeah.
And she, one Saturday afternoon, she comes by my house and she brought me a VHS tape. I'm aging myself, but I mean, people know how old I am. And it was basically slaughterhouse footage from PETA. And I was like, what is it? And she's like, oh, my sister said we should watch it. So I'm like, okay, pop it in the VCR. 5 minutes later, I had to stop. It was so horrifying. And from that moment on, we made a vow. We said, let's go in my closet, remove all leather, everything. We stopped cold turkey, became vegan overnight.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I was 15 years old and,
Well, we have that in common because I also was 15 years old at the time. And
that's so weird.
This was early 1980s for me. And the interesting thing for me is because at that point, I didn't know of animal rights movement. I didn't even know the term vegan. I didn't know anything at that point.
Me
So I killed an animal and it suffered in front of me and I had to mercy kill it. I can never unsee it. At the same time I killed this animal, I had a flash in my life. Something flashed in me. And next thing you know, within a few months, I was vegetarian. I didn't know what the term vegan was, so I had to learn all this myself. So it took me a little while to realize all the connections between the other animal product foods. And by 17, I was completely vegan on my own.
Wow.
And that's how it happened.
And were your parents encouraging of that, or were they like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, my father just rolled his eyes and said, "Oh, that's the Democrat side of your mom." My mom decided that she's like, "Well, I'm not going to cook for you anymore." And I said, "Okay, well, I can cook for myself." And I started, cooking. Well, really all I knew then was, scrambled tofu because In those
Yeah.
days, you didn't have all the alternative products there. It was just
I
tofu and vegetables,
know.
which is fine, simple foods. But as soon as she saw I was committed to making my own meals, she realized that I was serious, and that she kind of got over that.
Excellent. It's the same thing with me. My mom said, "Well, I don't know what to make you anymore. You're in charge of your own cooking." And that was kind of more or less good because, like you said, there was no information back then. I didn't know there was such a thing as vegan. I didn't know there was such a thing as an animal
Yeah.
rights activist. I had no clue.
Right.
I just saw something horrifying and I said, I never want to participate. And so we had the PETA newsletter. So we knew like no dairy, no honey, none of that. But I did become sick because I was just like feeding myself with rice and vegetables at a time where
Right.
your nutritional needs are
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
high. But long
Yeah,
story
yeah.
short, I tell the vegans of today, the young kids, I'm like, you got it easy. You got it so easy.
Yeah.
In my day,
Yeah.
it was like soya milk. There was no such thing as oat milk, almond milk. It was just soya milk.
Nothing.
And it would scale
I
in
didn't
your
even know there was
coffee.
soy milk in Jack. I didn't even know there was soy milk in those days. I didn't, I just drank water and juice and that was it. But
There you go.
times are different now, so that's a good thing. It makes it easier.
There's
for
an
people who wanna
evolution.
change their
There's
diet.
progress.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yes.
So I guess we'll get right into your time with Animal Liberation Front. So for viewers at home, because I'm not sure who among the audience is familiar with Animal Liberation Front. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit of a brief description of what it means, like Animal Liberation Front was a movement that, when was it started, and the evolution of it through the years?
Well, the Animal Liberation Front, or the ALF, pretty much started in the United Kingdom. It kind of bled out from the Hunt Saboteurs Association in the United Kingdom. And then in the US, it came a little bit later. But the Animal Liberation Front, the way I see it is, we're kind of like we were like the SEAL team for the animals, or we were like the special forces for the animals, okay?
Yeah.
So we did actions that weren't obviously legal in the letter of the law, but we did what we had to do to save animals. So the Animal Liberation Front has policies, in the sense of keeping up with nonviolence. Property destruction is not is allowed as long as you don't hurt anyone, any people, or any animals. And that was basically the idea. And it's an anonymous group. The basic idea is to liberate animals and do direct action in defense of animals.
Without hurting anyone,
that's
but creating economic sabotage to the companies, the corporations that abuse animals.
And that came later. The economic sabotage part came a little bit later in the beginnings of the Animal Liberation Front in the U.S. Mostly, it was strictly all liberations,
like freeing animals,
any kind of freeing animals from labs, farms, breeding facilities, wherever. That was, and to me, that is the truest of all forms of actions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wish I could do that myself. I mean, maybe we'll talk about that later, but I'm curious. Yeah. So you become like vegetarian at 15, 17, you're a full-fledged vegan. I'm assuming at that point you've made a circle of friends that are like-minded.
No.
I'm curious. No?
No, I didn't.
Oh my God.
No, not at that time. No one was. I had maybe one friend. I had one friend who became vegan with me. Okay, but I did. Okay, I'll take that back. I did when I lived in Florida. I went to high school in Florida.
Okay.
And I did go, and I saw there was a cooking class for vegetarians, or vegan at the time, cooking class happening at this place in Florida. And long story short, I went there and I met a community of people who were vegans and animal rights activists, a place called Gentle World, it was a small community of vegan. A lot of these people came from the old hippie days, the 60s.
Yeah.
And so I met them, and that was the first time that I actually had was circled, I was sitting down and people were circled around me, were all vegans and all had the same mindset. It was a really mind-blowing experience for me at the time, but I'm still friends with them today. So they were a big influence, and they were the ones that showed me the first videos of liberations. happening in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And they showed me, the old VHS tape, and there was one, and you might have seen it, but there was one particular tape where these people were, a bunch of activists, ALF activists, were taking animals out of I think it was a lab or a breeding facility, and there was one person carrying this large sheepdog. I mean, just amazing that this. And I figured out later that I think it was a woman who had this dog, but and running this dog through the cut fence and out into a vehicle, and that really, as a kid, that was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I was like, that's what I want to
cool.
do now. So after that, I began to realize that in California, especially in Los Angeles, which in the 1980s, early 1980s, that was the kind of, and Northern California, well, I'd say more like San Francisco Bay Area, were the two areas that where animal rights was getting really big there. And I knew about that. So basically what I did was when I was 18 and I graduated high school, I packed up my little Honda car and I drove across country saying, I'm going to save all the animals in the world. Now, that's a little naive speaking at that time, but that was my goal,
You were determined.
So I did it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was determined.
And you did it, to your credit. It didn't just
it.
stay a dream.
It did. I mean, there are definitely some things that I wish I still could have been in, campaigns I wish I could have done that I didn't. So I have some that didn't happen, but some that did.
Absolutely. So I guess that was your first foray into Animal Liberation Front. And I was wondering if you could take us back to the first time you did this direct action. How does it work? Like, were you, I guess in communication with others and you decided on a certain laboratory, or can you just take us back to your first action? I'm sure you remember it.
Oh, well, yeah, I think it took me a little while to get into the organization, to meet the other people who were involved. And they were obviously had their own security issues. So it took a little while, but when they began to trust me, a number of us ended up getting together and organizing to raid a lab at a university. And we basically, the thing is one of the guys, he had the keys to the lab because he got the keys from someone who was sympathetic to us. So for 6 months, we were walking in that place and scoping it out and taking pictures and doing all that. And we had it all ready. No one knew. We got in a number of times even before. So we did dry runs and we did all that, but we had easy access. And you got to remember, this is the 1980s. There wasn't like the high-tech security like they have now, right? This is very basic security, if any at all, at that time. So, we were able to get over almost 300 animals out. That was like cats and rabbits and mice. And they were doing horrible experiments. We found the documentation of the awful experiments. We took all that stuff. I got the privilege to destroy a stereotactic device that held monkeys. Yeah. To be honest, they were monkeys there, but we couldn't take them because I had no homes for them and I had no idea how to handle them. We just didn't have that expertise. So the only thing I could do was the only thing I could do is I brought a whole bunch of bananas and gave them bananas and told them I was sorry that I couldn't take them. And then there was a stereotactic device sitting in the hallway, and I took this hammer, this special small sledgehammer I specially bought for this because I knew it was there because I'd been in there like 3 times, and I destroyed it, and that was very satifying.
Yeah, no kidding. 300 animals.
But we did,
yeah, that's.
It was
huge.
it was just under 300. Yeah, so it was quite a few. They were doing horrible experiments on cats and just stuff that they repeated for years and years and years and years. And no results, nothing, weird experiments, blinding cats, impregnating cats, taking the kittens out of the mom, blinding them, putting them back in the mom, having them have a proper birth, and then they would like do perception tests on them, and it was just all really bizarre stuff. So we shut them. Not only did we take the animals, but all the research got shut down there. Those particular research projects that they were doing because they got such bad media.
So it was a university lab.
It was a university lab.
A big university, I guess.
Yeah.
And
so,
so like that must have been an amazing first experience, and you have to pre-plan this because these animals have to have a home, right? So you had already coordinated with sanctuaries, I guess, or
yeah, we had people that were taking them homes. We had a vet that would check them, and we had homes for all the animals.
So I mean, were the vets doing it pro bono? I mean, they were all like doing it for the good of, like rescuing?
Yeah, the vet we had was a sympathetic vet. So,
wow.
But so we were able to do that. But as soon as we gave the animals to the people that were taking the homes, that was where we weren't connected anymore. After that, they just went into the underground railroad, and we were gone. So we all went home. So that's how it kind of worked.
You weren't connected to the other people that were part of the event, or you're talking about the people that rescued?
We basically what we did was we took the animals out of the lab. We had meeting places with other people.
Yeah.
And we met those other people, and we transferred the animals to them, and we all went home, and they all took the animals to their new home. And
so you're assuming
basically after that, they didn't know me, I didn't know them.
Yeah.
Then that's how it worked.
That was the agreement. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. So how much pre-planning did that take? I mean, it must have taken months, to contact the right people. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, at least 6 months. Yeah.
So that was your first big one. And, like how you've done many, I guess, was it 20 years that you've done these kind of
20 years. Yeah, about 20 years. I've done a number, but remember, that wasn't the only thing I did as an activist. I did above ground campaigns constantly throughout my time. So I was kind of the dual activist. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that's the right thing to do, but in the sense of security wise, but at that time when the movement was gaining traction, it was just what we did. I still was protesting and was vocal, although I tried to keep myself as try not to be noticed too many times. I did in 1990 get arrested for that.
You mentioned that, and you went to prison.
Yeah, I got arrested for it, but they dropped the charges because I don't think they wanted to give up any more of their informants, or something happened. They just wouldn't bring forward what we needed, and they dropped the charges, and we walked away. So
thank God. But okay, so I was wondering, Animal Liberation Front, you said you liberated animals from research labs, farms. So all in all, was it mostly research laboratories that you liberated animals from? And can you speak?
No, it was everything. Yeah, it was a mix. It was a mix. The bunch of labs, that's where we got lots of animals, a bunch of breeding facilities, bunch of farming facilities.
There's no shortage.
Out of farm. There's no shortage. It's all out there. Fur breeders. We covered just about everything we could. So.
Okay, so I was wondering if
I even freed wild horses one time. So it's like we freed wild horses out of corral.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about the Cavel West Slaughterhouse that you obviously ended up destroying, thank God. But I was curious, can you speak a little bit? Because, I work in a conservative environment. I work in finance. And, a lot of my colleagues are, they see me go to protests at ITR labs, and they're like, but aren't they doing life-saving work? Aren't these tests leading up to saving lives? And I would love to hear what you have to say about that, because I think for the most part, these tests are not to save, for life-saving medicine. It's really, sometimes household products, pesticides, what levels are, so can you speak about what kind of research are they doing in those laboratories? And
okay, well, actually, there's numerous different kinds of research. Obviously, you have product testing on one side, then you have psychological testing, and then you have everything in between you could think of, horrible research stuff. But here's what it really comes down to. When people argue, don't we need these animals to improve our lives? Well, no, we don't. And I would argue, and the facts are pretty clear right now, that you can't correlate research on, you can't correlate animal physiology to human physiology. It just doesn't work that way. You can give cat aspirin and it will die. Yeah. You take aspirin, your headache feels better. Okay.
Yeah.
So so you have universities that are getting grants from the National Institute of Health, millions and millions of dollars, because you have to understand this is big business too. It's not just putting the research part of it aside. You got a whole business angle. You have breeders, you have researchers, you have universities, and you have everyone in just big money. I mean, millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in. At the same time, hundreds of millions of animals are being killed in what I see is all it's called vivisection, which means to cut while alive. But all types of vivisection is truly the most evil that humans do. Now, having said that, back in the 80s, we had this argument. We were like, listen, these tests you can't test cancer on mice and expect to get the same results in a human. It's just not. And then we had doctors that were all saying the same thing. The problem was in the 1980s is there were no alternatives. There were no non-animal testing alternatives out there. Now that's changed. Now we're in 2021, and there are major companies out there that strictly are working on research that does not use animals, and they're using everything from, computer models, but you're coming down to where they have organs on a chip. They can actually grow human organs, and they can actually create the whole human physiology there and be able to test these drugs, and their accuracies are way more. I mean, because look, we're looking at 95% of drugs that are tested on animals fail in human trials. I mean, and how many?
95, I think 96%. Failure rate.
At least that. Yeah, it's high, and it's only because. And I believe that the drug companies, if they had the alternative to not use animals, they would. The problem is the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, requires that even if they do non-animal testing, they have to do testing on animals. So there's people working on trying to get the FDA to change that ruling so that the pharmaceutical companies can start using these
new technology,
high-tech alternatives and new technologies without using animals, and therefore it saved them hundreds of millions of dollars.
Because those hundreds of millions should be invested in new ways and new technology,
and they can have drugs that actually work. Right. Then they can have drugs that actually work. We can actually maybe cure cancer. I mean, they've been doing cancer research on animals for I don't know how many years, many decades, and cancer is up 8% in the U.S. And you could say that to a lot of other, so you can say that about a lot of other diseases that've been studying on animals.
Have not been improved.
Breakthrough.
They've not been improved by animal testing. And what do you think is the reason that keeps them so, determined to continue animal testing? I mean, when you know that the new technology is at your disposal and, there's an alternative, like, why do you think they keep, funding animal testing like that?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it's a couple things. I think it's not willing to change, not willing to get out of that old school head that you have, how it is. I mean, us just as an individual in our own personal lives, how hard it is to change things. We struggle with our own personal feelings and how we change these things. If you think of that in a macrocosm, and you think about it as a cultural thing within these communities, the pharmaceutical communities and testing communities, and the FDA, these are people that won't refuse to move out of that mindset. The other part is it's big money. It's big money. It's big business. Animal research is big business for universities, breeders, everyone. Who wants to change when they're making big money? When a researcher is making $5 million a year or whatever they're making, why would they want to change it?
I can see the animal breeders will lose their money because, if you stop animal testing, then, they don't have that market anymore. But the researchers, they could still get the money from, the health organization. It would just be used towards the new technology. So, I find that it's not a good excuse.
I think there is hope, though.
Yeah.
I think there is some hope. I think there is some hope. And it's sadly not just because of the ethical reasons. I think the people who are working on non-animal testing methods, there are people there in those companies that are doing that who don't want to test on animals for ethical reasons, but they also know the scientific and medical reality that it's not the way to go anymore. It's done, it's archaic, it doesn't work. And
So I think that there will be change in that, as we have seen in just testing for cosmetics, how so many companies, because what they did was all cosmetics, most of them are ultimately the same products, right? I mean, all soaps and stuff, they have the same products that have already been tested on animals. So they don't need to test them on animals anymore.
No.
So they don't do it. And so that's why there's so many cruelty-free products out on the market. And I think that's going to change to pharmaceuticals, which is huge research. And then when getting into universities that are doing all these like insane research stuff, that's like, I mean, we could spend hours talking about the insanity.
The behavioral testing, that kind of
behavioral stuff. I mean, and all the monkeys they're using. I mean, since COVID, they're running out of monkeys. All these researchers are doing so much, they're running out of monkeys, and they're trying to, it's a big issue. So things have to change.
Absolutely.
And hopefully they will. I think there is hope. I'm a very pessimistic person. Because I'm realistic, right? I'm pessimistic.
You've seen it, so
I've seen a lot, but I do have hope that there is some change. I know some people who are working on that, and they're making steps toward getting that change. So we'll see.
We just need some progressive minds to be at the head of those organizations to make the right decisions, So I get the old school guys out of there.
When they die off, hopefully new people come in who are a little bit more involved.
And even China has now stopped demanding that, I think they stopped demanding cosmetic testing in the country a while ago, but at one point, any company that wanted to import their products into China had to prove that it was tested on animals, or, that the cost. And now they stopped that, and now they're encouraging the alternative method is actually better. It's more efficient. And so, So, if China's doing that.
And it's cheaper. It's cheaper. I mean, that's the thing. You have to think what they're thinking. They're thinking money, bottom line. That's how they think. It's not necessarily they care about animals. It's the bottom line. And it's true. Using the non-animal alternatives with the technology they have now, it will save them tens of hundreds of millions of dollars that they lose every year anyway, because their drugs go nowhere because they test them on animals and they're okay. And then they, for instance, like Vioxx, that drug actually said it improved heart function in small, like rats and mice. But when they gave it to humans, they were having heart attacks and people were getting strokes all the time. So they had to pull Vioxx off the market. So that's where you're getting into that slippery slope there. So.
Yeah, and what you've seen in those laboratories, I mean, I think viewers at home, I can't watch that stuff. Like, I've seen a little, smidgen of videos, and
who wants to watch it?
It's just
it's
so
not for you. You're already convinced.
No, thank you, because a lot of people are like, you never watched Dominion? I'm like, no, I don't need to. Like, I've been vegan for over 30 years, but it's
wow, that's a long time. Good for you.
Yeah, well, like you, we're old schoolers. But my point is, like, it's so horrific, and it's hard to compare cruelty, but what really gets to me is the fact that these animals endure this for years. And for years, they're stuck in that laboratory. So it's
their whole life.
Exactly. And it's just so inhumane. So yes, I pray that, we'll be moving in the right direction and let go of these old school animal testing. It's just, there's no place for it.
Yeah, me too.
There's no place for it.
Me too. I'm with you.
All right. So I just want to touch upon a little bit more of, obviously we talked about you liberating animals, having to coordinate with sanctuaries. And can you tell us a bit of the highs and lows of your time with Animal Liberation Front? So I'm sure you had highs where your first time rescuing animals and be able to have that direct impact on their lives is extremely gratifying. But there must have been lows. I mean, I guess the low is, being arrested, but, can you maybe expand upon that?
Well, I think also when I wasn't participating in liberations and stuff like that, I was also running campaigns constantly, and mostly, I think because I was a hunter at a young age and I had some pretty traumatic experiences that I can never unsee, as I told you before, that hunting always seemed to be, when it was campaigning, hunting seemed to always be part of that, seemed to be the focus of that issue. So whether it was hunting endangered species and that's when a number of us started the Hunt Saboteurs in the US in 1987. You know, we saw what was going on in England, and we all got together in a dark room with a light over the table, and we made our plans to start this start the organization here in the U.S. And we ran it. Well, we did it for about 7 years successfully. You know.
And how does that work? How does that work? Like, you basically scare off the animals so they're not shot by hunters? I'm not sure. How does it work?
Well, it really depends. It really depends on what animal they're hunting, right? So there's different hunters use different methods of hunting to hunt the animals. So we had to adapt and get creative and figure out different methods of keeping the hunters from killing the animals. And so, for instance, bighorn sheep down in California, they hadn't been hunted in 104 years because they were pretty much hunted to extinction. And they started this trophy hunt. Long story short, you know, whereas the first person on that, the first 5 people paid like 50 grand to do this hunt, and then the money would go back toward the bighorn sheep. Well, we saw that crap. So we decided that we were going to do a hunt sab on this hunt, and we did for almost 6 years continuously. Went after the hunt, and some years we were successful, some years none got killed, some years half got killed, other years they all, you know, there was a quota. I think it was 15 bighorn sheep.
But how do you prevent them from hunting? That's, I guess, what I'm curious.
That's right. So in that we used air horns was our big thing. We would basically go out to the hunt area, and we would track the hunters and follow the hunters. And then, you know, of course, we were all, you know, we loved the camo and stuff. So we like to blend in pretty well. And the idea with bighorn sheep is you really can't shoot them when they're moving, right? So they got to be standing still. So we right before we would watch the sheep, and we'd watch the hunters, and right as the sheep would stop and they were looking like they were going to shoot or about ready to shoot, we would just blow air horns and the sheep would run. It was a very simple, effective method.
Actually,
bear hunting, you know, bear hunting with dogs, and we went after bear hunters, and at that time they were using dogs to hunt bears. So the most creative thing is, funny enough, our group, even though a lot of us had long hair and dreads, and we'd go in camo and we'd camp in the same campgrounds all the hunters camped in, and they, for some reason, they didn't really get us, but they didn't really ask much. But we had this great thing with the dogs that I figured out was like, okay, dogs use smell as their sense to go after the bear trail. So what I did was we wore cotton gloves, and we'd spray, well, it was an anti-mate. It was called anti-mate, which is basically it's a perfume spray to put on dogs so they don't know they're in heat and stuff. So we'd put it on our gloves, spray on our gloves, and then we'd go up and talk to the hunters, and I would tell them, man, those dogs are so beautiful. I've raised dogs like this, you know, all the time. And I would be sitting there rubbing their noses with my gloves, petting them. And then they lost their scent.
Oh my God.
So then they couldn't smell anymore. And then we would walk away and we'd say, have a nice day, sir. Or, you know, we'd talk to them, have a nice day, good luck.
No clue. They had no clue.
No clue. No, not clue, whatever. It was a great, and you know, and then we put scents on the side of the road to distract them, like other scents hunters buy, just to get them off the scent, and put the scents in a circle. So instead of the dogs running in a straight line, they would just run in a circle, and the hunters were like, what's going on with my dogs? And they didn't really figure that out.
Oh my God, so that's pretty clever.
How many bears we could have saved? I don't know how many bears we could have saved, or we did save, but hey, we did what we thought was best. And we were a motley crew of people, but we were good at what we did. You know,
wow.
We thought it out.
You certainly were very creative. I was wondering if you could talk about the fur farm you purchased in 1990, and you posed as a fur farmer, or you pretended to be a fur farmer, and
right. We posed as fur. We wanted to start a fur farm, so we wanted we wanted to purchase a fur farm. We wanted to. Okay, so when that farm was done, I wasn't in the initial time. That there was a couple other partners of mine who were dealing with the guy and were getting to know, it was kind of a really weird story, but I'm trying to take too long on it. But I think the guy, the guy who owned the fur farm actually used to be an animal damage control gunner.
Okay.
So he used to tell me that he would fly a plane by himself, and he would steer the plane with his feet and shoot out the window and kill wolves. He was very good at it. That's what he told.
He was proud of that.
But when I went in his, right, and he let us stay in his house. So we stayed at his house a few nights, right? Getting to know the fur farm and understanding the process. I wasn't there for any killing. It was just the end process when we actually were going to offer him money to buy all the animals. You know, and I'd go in his bathroom to use his bathroom, and he had like organic soap and Dr. Bronner's soap in his bathroom and Tom's toothpaste. It was just this kind of bizarre,
like a dichotomy.
Mix,
yeah, completely.
Right. Dichotomy. And he had this wolf pelt. He had this big, huge wolf pelt on his wall, and he was telling us a story that was that was one of the wolves he killed. I don't know if it was the last one he killed, but I connected him to this really famous, this real story that came out about a particular wolf that was killed by ADC, and it got really public and stuff. And I connected that was the guy that shot this wolf. But the weird thing was, I think he basically told me, he goes, I'm over this. He's like, I'm done with this life. I don't want to do this anymore. So
thank God.
After all, he had like, so we said, we'll give you $10,000 for all your animals. It was 60 mink, 2 bobcats, and 2 Canadian lynx.
Was that a fair price at the time?
I think so. I mean, yeah, it was a long time.
He took it.
1992. He took the money.
Yeah.
And we took the animals. So.
And he had no clue that you were really wanting to save these animals, or it didn't matter?
You know, I kind of think he might have known who we were, but let it happen.
Okay.
I don't know. I to be honest with you, I don't know how he. I mean, we were pretty good at going undercover, but. You know, I don't know. It's you know.
It's hard. Like at one point it comes, you know, like you let something out.
Right. There were hints that he thought that we weren't who we were, but he was letting it happen. That was kind of my intuition on the whole thing. But you know, whatever happens, we able to take those animals out, get them out of there.
And I have to ask you, like, you know, because often the case is that when animals are domesticated, like wild animals are domesticated like that, you cannot release them back in the wild. So I was curious how you managed to rehabilitate all these minks and, you know, I guess the 2 bobcats and lynx. How did you manage to do that? Like, did you work with professional animal behaviorists, or, I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, we actually had some people that were that had experience. I had no experience myself in rehab of wild animals, but we had a couple people that were experts in rehabbing wild animals. And you have to remember too that it's really hard to take some of the instincts out of these animals. Now, even mink, they will have a good chance of surviving even if they just jump out of the cage and run away. Because they're pretty adaptable animals. Now, they were at the point where they were taught to hunt. I wasn't at the point where I wasn't there when they were doing the rehab. So I can't say that I rehabbed the animals myself. But we had people doing it, and that's how you do it. You work with other people who their specialty is doing this, and my specialty was doing that, and I passed it on, and they were trained to hunt, and they were released. They were trained to survive on the best that they could, and they were released. And you know what? We gave them a chance.
Exactly.
You just, it's like, what's the option? You're going to sit in a cage.
What's the alternative? Yeah, that's
stuck in you and butchered and skinned alive. I mean, I think some freedom would be appropriate.
Absolutely. And I think I have 2 cats, and I honestly think cats are super smart, and they're survivors. You know, you often see cats, they survive winters here, and I'm like, in my mind, like it's minus 40, and you're like, how the hell does that cat survive? But they're very smart, and they find ways. And I think, like you said, their instincts are so strong that, you know, I think that takes over. And you know,
and you give them a chance. You do the best you can, right? I mean, even wildlife rehabs that are out there today, you know, rehabbing. You know, of course, these animals weren't raised in the wild. They were raised domestically, most likely. Now, I can't even actually tell you for a fact that like the lynx and the bobcat were either caught from the wild or raised domestically. I can't recall that. It's all blur, so much going on. But I think you know, if you do the best you can, you give them a chance.
And what do
That's all
you
I can
think
say.
about, just off the top of my head, like, what do you think about places like Big Cat Rescue? Because that's what they're claiming to do, is because this is like exotic pet industry. And
Sure,
a lot of
sure.
people have these cats and they cannot apparently be, put back in the wild. It would be, like they
Sure.
would die.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure you've seen, what is it, the big documentary that came out, Joe Exotic.
I didn't see it, but I know of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's a fine line there between true rehab and also true sanctuary. I
Yeah.
mean, true rehab, true sanctuary, and people that do things like Joe Exotic, these people that
Roadside
make
zoos.
money, exploit them again, and keep them in cage. Now, of course, you have to understand that in this hemisphere, in the northern hemisphere, lions and tigers, they're not native. Maybe back
No.
hundreds of millions of years ago when it was all Pangea, they were. I mean, actually, cheetahs did run in North America back in the day when all the continents were one chunk. That's
True.
why. But these animals aren't native. Lions aren't native to this. They live in Africa, obviously,
Yeah.
and tigers live in India and parts, different parts of the world. So you can't really release those animals, but if you give them a good sanctuary, that's a good thing. However, there are rescues in Africa themselves that take in the native wildlife there, and they do everything they can to rehab them and release them. And if they can't, then they live out their lives the best that they can without being exploited by humans.
That's the best
a sad
scenario.
side effect.
Yeah.
It's kind of so they're luckier than a lot of them.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm curious, because, doing all this, this liberation, it must have made you feel a little bit above the law, like, what would you say was your mindset? Like when you first started doing Animal Liberation Front, I mean, you were young and you were inspired by these actions you've seen on video, but did that mindset progress and evolve into something else like over the years? Because 20 years is a long time. So I'm sure that you became, there was a maturity process as well. So.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you grow and learn from your mistakes. But I think that there were times where there were really good moments, but you got to remember, I wasn't liberating animals every night of my 20 years. I mean, there were gaps in there. So I was involved until I got shut down eventually, which I'm sure we'll get into that later in the interview.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so you're gonna have to ask me the question again because
I guess what would you say was the high point for you and all those 20 years? What would you say is like, is there a moment that you said, oh my God, I'm so glad, I was part of this, and, like you have a lot of pride and good memories from it. So.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. There were high points. I can't say that it wasn't satisfying to free animals from oppression and give them good homes for the rest of their life. I mean, anyone who thinks like us would feel that. And that's a great feeling. We were also trying to take a message out as a whole too. I mean, liberating animals, we were liberating for their individual beings and freeing them, but at the same time, we were also putting a message out that it was like, there's people out here who don't like what you're doing, and we're going to do what we have to do to free them. Now, I think that, to be honest with you, I would have preferred these issues weren't even around. I could just be a normal person and just do whatever I want. I never really grew up wanting to break the law. I mean, there are people who have taken other people who have done similar things that I have, who have taken that and written books about it, and I was just more humble. I just felt like it was that's what needed to be done. I didn't really feel like there was any option. I mean, I believe in all forms of action. Whether it's direct action or protest or legislation work,
Do
I think
something.
all of them combined work great. All of it. It's something will work. I'm critical of maybe strategy, but I'm not critical of how people want to make change. I do think that the low points. I think the only low points I had were the other people. I mean, here we come into the human factor, right? We're just a bane on this planet. We are complex species, and many of us are I don't know. I think humans are just flawed in general, and I think that when the human factor comes in, egos, jealousies, what are all those emotions that come in and affect us? Those are the low points, because
I agree.
there are people that turned on me. There are people, I never turned on people in the sense of, telling on people or anything like that. But it's the human factor there that was really difficult.
So I hear you. So you were like, you wish you didn't have to do that. And it's like for many animal rescues are like, I hope there's a day that I don't need to do this, right? It's like your goal is not to break the law. The goal is to do to right a wrong, and that was the whole point.
I mean, to put it this way, if these issues weren't going on, I would have never broken the law.
No, exactly.
Because I have no reason. I'm not a criminal. I'm a freedom fighter. I was never a criminal. I was never a terrorist. I was never anything like that. I never hurt anyone. Maybe I hurt him in the pocketbook, but I never hurt anyone physically. I don't.
That's right.
So I would have preferred to just not have to do this, and life would be a lot easier. But unfortunately, that's where my soul went. I'm many ways tortured by all what's going on in the world. It's heavy on the soul.
It is. It takes its burden, like seeing all this cruelty and facing it dead on. It's hard. It must be very hard. So let's move on to actually what brought you to prison. And so this Cavel West Slaughterhouse in Oregon. I was curious how you came to hear about it. I mean, what year did this happen? First of all, that you
1997.
1997.
Yeah.
And
1997.
And who told you about it, and how did you discover it, and what made you go after it? I mean, for obvious
I'm not going to go into any details, because there are some cases that are still ongoing over this.
Okay.
But I will say that that Cavel West was a horse slaughterhouse that was killing up to 500 horses a week. It had been in this small town in Eastern Oregon for at least 20 years that I know of, because I know that people had been fighting to close this place down for about 20 years. Now, no one in that town, most people didn't like it. Now, a lot of them, because it's cowboy country out there. Cowboys like their horses.
The Midwest.
So it's different, that's, and here we go again with the speciesism part, where people, like one animal, but don't care about the other species, right? So, but still, it was being, there were attempts to close this down for many, many years. It was owned by a foreign company. I'm pretty sure it was the Belgian mob. And they were basically slaughtering all these horses every week and sending them out, exporting overseas, mostly to France, Canada, Japan, and all that. So it was a horrendous place. I mean, other than that, people complained about the drain sewers out in the streets filling up with blood, and hearing the screams of the horses. And it was pure evil. This place was pure evil, and it had to go. I don't necessarily, it had to go.
I know you can't get into too many details, but I think what happened, it was mostly for export, right? So like the market was not in the US. It was mostly, I know Japan's a big importer of horse meat. And you mentioned Canada. Yeah. I thought we were more on the export side as well, because
I made it. Yeah, that was an error on my part. Yeah, it is on more on the export side, but it was mostly France,
Europe, Japan.
It was Europe, Japan, and I'm sure there were some other countries too, but a lot of it was in France.
Wow.
A lot of it was in France. There was a lot of horse meat there. So,
yes, a lot of French restaurants are actually named after that. So. In my city, so, I think La Queue de Cheval is a restaurant in Montreal. It's like very famous. It costs like a fortune to eat there, and it's despicable. You see carcasses in the window, and somehow this is considered civilized. I don't know.
Yeah, well, people get numb to it. I think it's also kind of like the DDT issue, the pesticide DDT. Correct? It was this pesticide it impacted the environment and wildlife so intensely that they banned it in the United States. But they didn't ban making all the products to make it. They still make all the chemicals to make DDT, and they just ship them to other countries, and they make the DDT and use it in these other countries. Same thing with the horse meat. We don't eat horse meat, and it's not legal to eat horse meat in the US. However, we were processing horses, wild horses, old used domestic horses that people didn't want, and sending them overseas to be consumed over there. So that's kind of what was going on.
And am I mistaken in saying that, you know, once the big, you know, you destroyed this Cavel West horse slaughterhouse, and it gets into the news and media, and I think the US banned horse meat production after that. Is that true?
Yeah, they did. It was 10 years later in 2007. They did legislation that banned the slaughterhouse. So there were 3 slaughterhouses left in 2007. There were 2 in Texas, and there was 1 in Illinois. The one in Illinois was owned by the same people who owned Cavel West.
Right.
Now, at one point, the people after Cavel West was long gone, the Illinois factory wanted to expand their make their company, their area, their footprint bigger there, and they weren't allowed to. So what happened was it suddenly burned down, and then the case was closed, and they got insurance money for it. So I don't know, something weird happened there. That's you know, it wasn't animal activists that did anything to that place in Illinois. It was the company themselves. So there was weird stuff, but yes, it got all the last 3 slaughterhouses were shut down. Now, there are people trying to get that back going again.
Oh boy.
I think, surprisingly, I just read that even in one of Donald Trump's, I hate even using his name, that they expanded the ban on horse slaughter in the U.S. for a longer time, because in 2013 there were people trying to get it back. So as of right now, as far as I know, there's no horse slaughter, but they're just shipping them to Canada and to Mexico. So the issue's not changed.
Oh, so they're shipping the horses and to be slaughtered in Canada. Oh boy. Okay.
Yes. So that they're just taking them over the border, and they're slaughtering in Mexico and in Canada, and that's how it's still going. So that issue is not finished yet.
And can I ask you, what do you believe led to the ban in the US in the first place? You said it wasn't necessarily animal rights activists that were pushing. It was really the result of what, you know?
Well, I to be honest with you, I was so broiled up in my legal case at the time, because I'd been arrested in 2005.
Yeah.
So I remember I was actually in a hotel ready to go see my lawyer, or a hearing coming up, and it came on TV. And I was like sitting there going, God, it's about freaking time they did this. I mean,
10 years later.
I guess I gotta go. I guess I'm going to get locked up. But now they see that we don't want these places here. But I think a lot of the reason why, here we go back to speciesism again, okay? I think a lot of the reason why horse slaughter got here, because horses in America have a different history. People see them differently. I mean, they were big back when the West was being won. The Native Americans even used them. And I think, and nowadays people have horses as pets, and we in this country don't generally eat our pets. And I think it's just the way we perceive these animals differently than like in other countries, like you know, which that was part of it, I think.
Okay, so it was like society that pushed for that move, I guess, you know, like Americans felt like it was wrong. And I guess being in the media because of you, and, you know, it became a big news. People were exposed to the fact that this was happening. Maybe they weren't aware of it before. And it became like, it caused like an outrage, I guess. And
I mean, that's a possibility. To be honest with you, I don't really know if anything I did really affected that. I don't know that. Maybe some people made aware of it because of that. But, you know, I know that years later, a friend of mine told me that he had a friend who was actually in a restaurant in that same town where Cavel West was. And there were a couple cowboys, you know, with their cowboy hats on, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they were sitting there saying how glad they were that place was gone. And he could overhear them saying, oh, I'm glad that place was never, you know, was destroyed and never came back, because I hated that place. And I was like, that's interesting, but that's it wasn't very popular.
For whatever reason, we're happy that they didn't want that place. You know, we need more people to be opposed. Yeah, exactly. So I have to ask you, because this is a big question for me, because one of my greatest fears, and I imagine during your time at doing all these direct actions that went against, that were illegal, you must have been worried for your safety. I mean, the thought of going to prison must have crossed your mind. And that's like one of my greatest nightmares, is going to prison. And you actually lived through that. So I have to ask you, how did you feel when you first heard that you're going to prison for doing something right? Because you destroyed the slaughterhouse. There was no one there. Like, you did not hurt any human being.
Right.
Essentially, you just caused economic sabotage, but you're doing a good action, for a good cause, and you end up going to prison. Like, how did that news hit you? How did you react?
Well, you have to remember, I mean, you have to remember too that at the same time, people like us are looking at it differently than the people who are on the law side. People, they're breaking the law no matter what it is.
Yeah.
You're breaking the law. We are a land of laws, and that's the way the United States is. But as for myself, I didn't want to go to prison. I didn't even want people to know who I was. I wasn't interested in publicity that wasn't my goal. My only goal was to be an activist and do the right thing. And I'm not even saying that some of the tactics that I even used at the Cavel West thing, were things that I really enjoyed or liked at all. Because, I think when you're, there's just things that, it's kind of like, all right, I've thought about this a bit and I've wondered, how could I compare it to? But I guess it's kind of like when you go in the military, okay? And then you actually go to war and you shoot someone. Now, to some people, they're murderers. To other people, they're freedom fighters or they're heroes, And I think for that person that actually does that, some of those people may like doing that, but other people, I'm sure it was a big emotional toll to kill someone in war for the first time. So, I think that just when it comes down to it, there's just things that sometimes you do, but you don't necessarily think that it's like the best thing to do, or it makes you feel so great and powerful, because it never really did to me. It was definitely it was controversial, and I was never fully comfortable with doing that kind of action. When a place burns to the ground, it's like, it's not, I wasn't
there could have been
easy to do. I mean, there could have been, and at that time I realized that I was done, because I had been doing it for so many years, that I was done being involved in these kinds of actions, which is ironic, because when I retired, that was the one that I got caught for and did time for. So
I know. It's
so
ironic.
Ironies in life. So it's kind of crazy, but I didn't feel powerful. I didn't enjoy necessarily breaking the law. It's not. Some people, I'm sure, did, and
they get off on it.
Great for their own little egos, but for me, and for me, it wasn't that way. I just really tried to keep a humble attitude about it, and this is what I did, and that's the consequences I got.
Yeah, but how did you take it? Like, going to prison, were you terrified? I mean, how did you feel about it?
Well, I wasn't necessarily terrified. It was a long time ago, but I wasn't necessarily terrified. I had been to jail before. I was in 1992-93. I was jailed for 6 months because I refused to testify to a grand jury about other activists, right? So I kept my mouth shut. They eventually released me. I won. I never talked about anyone. And they eventually had to release me because it was just becoming punitive, not, so that wasn't, I was in contempt of court. That's what it was. So I wasn't charged anything or had anything on my record, but I did 6 months in jail. So jail and prison are different, but at the same time, they have a lot of similar things. So I had already kind of experienced that. And I kind of knew what to expect, although I had never been in prison before.
And this was medium security prison, so it's not like
it was a medium
little paradise jail.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't well, I mean, it was a federal medium facility prison. It had good outdoor facilities. It had tennis courts, racquetball, football field, track, basketball courts, to keep people, and a weight room and all that. So, I mean, out of most of the prisons I went to, I got lucky. Because
Yeah.
most of the prisons that other people went to, I got lucky because I stayed at that one prison the whole time, and I pretty much was left alone.
Oh, really?
The whole
Okay, thank God.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
I mean, in the sense of other people knew who I was and what I was in for, because that's the first thing they ask you when you come to prison. What are you
Yeah,
here for? And you have to tell them. And I knew that,
yeah,
because if you don't tell them, then they think you're a child molester or something like
yeah,
that, and
and
then
then you're
you
dead.
get, yeah, then you're done. So
Yeah.
I just told them straight up, that's what I did, and I wasn't a snitch, and everyone believed me, and I had some issues with
That
people
that
here
got
and
you,
there, but generally it went smooth.
that got you probably respect, because the fact that you refused to reveal the names of the other activists, I mean, that, a lot of us would like to think we'd be that honorable, but when faced with the consequences of going to prison, not so sure, if we would, stand
Well,
that test.
yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't know. I'm not one of the snitches in the case. I mean, everyone who they wanted to know about it already told the cops or the feds that they were the people that did it, and they told on everyone else. But I still wouldn't tell on them, because it's an ethical issue. It's not
yeah,
like
it's a
it's
principle.
not like you witness someone murdering someone or raping someone. That's a whole
Yeah.
different ballgame.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
That's when it's like, yeah, that dirtbag did that, and that dirtbag needs to be locked up.
Yeah,
It's a political, when it comes to politics and political actions and
yeah,
revolutions or revolutionaries or however you want to call it. You just don't do that. And unfortunately,
yeah,
it was just out of 10 people, there was only me and one other person that truly did not give the government information on other people. And I did 14 more extra months for that. They told me they would give me that much off if I testified, and I said no, and I got extra 14 months. So when that 14 months came up, when I was in prison, I had 14 months left before it's being released. I was like, this is my time. I own this time, because I
yeah,
chose to do that. So I
yeah.
owned it, and it helped keep me strong. Prison's not an easy place to be.
No,
I
I
never
can.
wanted to be a prisoner. I don't want to be a felon. I don't want to
No
be,
kidding.
looked at as that, but I did what I did, and I broke the laws of the land. But I also shut down a place forever, and they never killed another horse again there. So,
Yeah, gotta give you
I mean, the guards respected me. They liked me.
Yeah.
The guards, even the guards were, one guard even came up to me and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" I'm like, "What are you
Yeah,
talking about?" He's like, "You don't belong here." I'm like,
no.
I broke the law, I mean, and he's like,
He was like, let
and
me
funny,
get
this is
you
what he said.
out.
He goes, yeah, he goes, let me tell you something. I would have done the same thing. You did a good thing. And I'm sitting there like, what? I mean, it was
Well, you
it was
did.
different,
Yeah, you did.
you know.
And so I
So,
guess, did you get, I mean, you just told me like, it wasn't fun to be in prison for sure, but I guess, did anything positive, can you think of anything positive came out of it, apart from, maybe just more self-introspection? I guess you have all this time to yourself and,
well, positive, huh? Okay, well, the only things I did was I was a runner.
okay.
And I ran a spin class for spin bikes. I set up
Oh,
that whole thing, and I just worked out all the time. And I lost a bit of weight because, one, I was exercising, and two, I stayed vegan the whole time. So
yeah.
I was able
Oh,
to
yeah,
keep my vegan diet going.
I just
Yeah.
thought of that question. How do you stay vegan in prison? I guess you eat the rice and the pasta and
Yeah, and they had beans that were dehydrated that were vegetarian beans you could buy at the commissary. So I basically bought food, and I ate a lot of oatmeal.
Yeah.
That was like
Oh, yeah.
my staple was oatmeal
Okay.
with fruit. I put dried fruit in it. I mean, you could buy things in the commissary, and I would make my own meals in the microwave in the cell
Wow.
units we were in. So and then I basically was able to get on a dinner. I told him that I was of Jewish heritage, so I could get, which I'm not, but I had to do what I had to do, right?
Yeah,
No offense to people of Israel or Jews, but
I'm sure.
I told him that my mom was Jewish, and so I was able to get a special meal that they had I think it was 2 meals a week, and they had fresh vegetables on the plate. So what we would do is
Wow.
we'd smuggle the raw broccoli and stuff. We weren't allowed to take food out of the chow hall, so I would
Wow.
smuggle it out, and then we would cook it in the thing. Or you buy vegetables on the black market. Guys would come in who were working with their carts, and they'd have onions and stuff they stole.
Oh my God, you have to buy vegetables on the black market. Oh
yeah, that's how I survived. And I mean, to be honest with you, some of the people who got arrested me weren't even vegetarian anyway, because they were more the eco Earth First side, maybe, or not Earth First. I want to correlate Earth First with that, but they were just more on the environmental side.
Yeah.
But all the other people that were vegans did not stay vegan in prison. They all started eating meat again. That's all I can say. That's how much of a traitor they all were.
Wow.
Not only did they snitch on other people and do a lot of damage to the movement,
they betrayed
but they
the animals.
ended up,
yeah.
They betrayed the animals again by eating meat and being weak and not fighting, for their food.
I guess their principles were not really entrenched in them, like yours, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, I was kind of bummed. I mean, I don't see why they couldn't be. I mean,
no.
I'm
you proved it. You proved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was able to do. Now, there was other people that have done it too, who have been able to stay vegan, who were in other cases, like the Shack 7 people.
Yeah.
All those people that got arrested and did jail time, prison time, they all stayed vegan.
Like Jake Conroy and...
It's doable.
Yeah, exactly.
Jake Conroy, yeah.
Good people. Good people. Well, I just wanted to ask you a last question about your time in prison. How did your family react? Did you have a wife at the time, or your immediate family?
My wife, yes. My immediate family and my wife were all supportive. All my friends were supportive. Even people that weren't involved in any kind of political activity or animal rights or the environment, they were supportive too of me.
Wow.
There's of course people that hated me, but I didn't see them, so I didn't really care. There were people.
But it must have been so hard, for your wife. I mean, did you have children at the time, or?
No, I had no children.
She
has a child from previous marriage, but I'd never had any children. So I made sure of that years ago. I didn't want to bring children into this world. It's crazy. So
same here. Same here.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is that for my wife, she stayed home and held up our house, our household, so that I could have it when I came back. And she did a very honorable, and she was very strong, and she was very supportive, and she came to visit me as much as possible. We were, 2,000 miles apart. She was very strong and did a great job being supportive. And my sisters, of course, and my mother. My father, thank God my father wasn't around when this happened, because it would have stressed out my poor old dad. But my mom was very supportive of it.
Well, thank God, because you needed that support for sure.
Yeah.
I guess I would like to touch upon something that's very important. I've asked, like my guests so far that have come on the podcast, some people are at the head of rescues doing saving dogs from the meat trade, for example. And I always wonder, how do you deal with the psychological warfare that this brings on? Because you're facing the worst of humanity. I mean, humankind are capable of atrocious things, and I don't know how you manage to on one hand to stay optimistic about humanity, and at the same time, like, how do you keep doing the work and not break down at every turn, because you're facing cruelty dead on. And I see it on my computer screen, and it's affecting me like deeply. It's like caused me sleepless nights.
Sure.
So you facing all this cruelty, seeing these, how do you deal with it emotionally, psychologically? Do you have like certain rules that you've come by? Like, for example, I discovered Yulin Dog Meat Festival, and that was the first time that really awoken the animal rights activist in me. Because before then, although I was vegan, it was not part of my environment. Like like we said at the beginning, I didn't know there was such a thing as an animal rights activist. I just wasn't eating animals. But when I saw Yulin Dog Meat Festival, it was only 3 years ago, and that showed me what man is capable of, and it just tore a hole in my soul. And it was this is seeing the computer screen images, and I made a vow to not watch any of that anymore, because it was destroying me. It was killing me. It was making me so overwhelmed with emotion that I was not able to be an advocate. So I'm just love for you to speak about that,
Right.
That side of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think for me, it's not only the animal cruelty and exploitation of animals, but it's also the exploitation and the coming death of our whole planet, of all ecosystems and the connection of it all. And I think when you really start looking at the big picture, it is devastating to your soul. I mean, I always feel a weight on my shoulder. I have all my life. How do I deal with it? I don't know. I think I do things that I enjoy, like I live in the country. I take hikes all the time with my wonderful dog. I live in an area where there's lots of wildlife around my house, and I take those moments in and know that right at that time, that reminds me about what everything is all about, what life on every level is all about. It's about preserving nature and living on this planet if we can, we'll see if we can, but we live in tune with nature and live with nature, not against it. So and I think maybe I definitely have like major breakdowns at times where I just sit there and just start crying and just feel the devastation and the sadness of all the loss, and the fact that I have to be one of the people, we have to fight this issue. It's like, that's not right. I shouldn't have to be out there fighting this issue. I should be there with nature and enjoying it and having a good life, which I have a good life. However, putting it in perspective, it's like, these issues are really, really difficult to deal with, but you just have to find that inner strength and allow it to motivate you to keep going. Now, I agree with you. Watching videos over and over again, no way. I don't need to see that. That's watching videos over and over again is like the definition of insanity. It's like watching it over and over again, but nothing really changes. So no, I don't. I'm with you on that, but I think it's just how we have to find certain peace in our life and find those moments that are really joyful. Find the moments where you just for me, being in tune with nature and seeing it and what all the power within it, and those moments keep me going. So I do the best I can.
I agree with you. I think it's in those moments where I take a hike and up the mountain and you see the world and you're like, oh, you're reminded that it can be so beautiful, right? Because often we're seeing such the ugly side of the world. And, if we keep our noses strictly on that all the time, it's like, it's not healthy, right? Like we need to be balanced. Obviously. And if you're always looking at these videos, it's very scarring, and it does, it's debilitating at the end of the day. And you're not going to be as an effective activist if you keep yourself in that, mindset that, oh, the world is ugly, the world is awful, humans are horrible. That's not a good place to work from, so you need to okay.
You have to have healthy
face
balance,
reality,
balance.
but move beyond it,
and enjoy your life too. Have those moments with your friends or with whatever you want to. Take a vacation. That's okay. As an activist, that's okay to do, to take a little time off for yourself, because you have to refuel yourself. You have to get yourself going. Otherwise, you're just going to drive yourself nuts. So for those people, I know people who work 15 hours a day, 7 days a week on animal issues. And it's like, you know what? It's okay to take a break. You need to take a break.
Absolutely.
So I've done that in the past. It's just to keep yourself healthy, mentally healthy.
Absolutely. Amen to that. I totally agree. And like you, I think, you must be extremely sensitive, like probably a hypersensitive person. People that care to that degree about animals and life in general are very sensitive. And I read in an article that, you felt like you're like a channel for the animal's pain, right? So I feel very similar. Like when I see that kind of stuff being done to an animal, it's like as if it's being done to me, right? Like you embody that pain and suffering. And so that's why it's so important to know, okay, your limits, and okay, I can't take that up to a certain point, like it's gonna destroy me. So, let's be careful about what we expose ourselves to daily, and let's try to stay positive in spite of everything. And, you know, so
Sure.
that way you're a little bit more able to take those actions and be strong, you know, because animals need us to be strong, not like, you know, debilitated and overwhelmed with emotion. Right. So, yeah.
And you know, and I like the word sensitive, because I agree. I think a lot of it is being in touch with your empathy as a person, under feeling what someone else feels, feeling that suffering that someone. Now, you know, I feel when I see people in Syria being bombed. I don't understand it because I don't live in that situation, but I have empathy for those people. I have empathy for all the animals that suffer and die hundreds of millions per day in the slaughterhouses, or all the wildlife that's being depleted and killed off. I mean, it's all about understanding that empathy. And I think most people in the world, and this is kind of my thinking on it, is that generally for a lot of people, it's just easier not to care, right? It's just easier just to go about life and live in bliss.
It would be so much simpler if we didn't give
It would
a crap.
be so much simpler, and a lot of people do that. And in some ways, I'm envious. I would like to be able to have that, but in other ways, I'm glad I don't live that way, that I am empathetic and I am aware and conscious of the issues that are going on in the world. It's kind of what's there for us. And it's unfortunate that we have to, you know, emotionally suffer through these things, but it's what it is.
It's your purpose. I mean, I think that is a greater purpose than yourself, right? Like, for me, living my life is not about going to my job and making money and so I can pay off my mortgage and, like, you know, you need to go beyond that. Like, why am I here? Like, how can I make a difference? How can I make the world a better place, right?
Yeah, and especially as you know, I can say for my country, being a white person, a white male in my country, I'm not extremely busy just fighting for my own rights or trying to fight so I don't get a knee on my neck by a cop or shot by a cop in the back because I have a different color skin. So, I mean, I think that's why a lot of the animal rights movement for a long time has been a lot of white people. However, that's changed over the years, and now we're seeing a lot of people from all cultures coming in and all that, which is great. But, you know, I think that when you're focusing on just trying to survive yourself, or if you're oppressed yourself, how are you going to help others? But, you know, it's harder.
Absolutely. You bring about a good point, because often I hear like vegans say, oh, you know, like, you should do this, you know, and they're talking to like people that live below the poverty line. Like, when you're in that mindset where every day is just about survival, you're not going to have all this energy to put, like, let me figure out what I can do for the dog, you know, like, let me figure out what I can do for pigs, you know. No, you're just trying to fight for survival. And I, you know, to that point, like, you know, some people say vegan is for privilege, you know, middle class, or, you know, like, you know, yes and no. Like, yes, if people live on food stamps, you know, you can't be that picky about what you're putting in your mouth. Like, you're just happy to get something. But, you know, I don't know, like, some people say, well, you can eat rice and beans and that's cheaper than meat. I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, you know,
I mean, it's a good question. I think that it's cultural issues. It's class issues. It's, you know, race issues. There's all these things that combined that, you know, well, the system is very well designed, at least in this country, I can say, it's very well designed to keep people to consume what the system wants you to consume. I think when people are educated and learn more about what they're consuming, and not only how it affects those animals that suffer in the whole slaughter process and the raising, you know, being raised from a small animal to when they're slaughtered, is also the impact it has on the ecology of the planet.
Yes.
Right? So
let's talk about that, because I do want to ask you about the work that you're doing and on the environmental front. And so you've been at, you know, like, when it seems like as soon as you became an animal rights activist, you were also an environmentalist, you know, like, you were really focused back in the day, even in the 90s. But I'm curious how you went about creating these organizations. We talked about it at the beginning: Sea Defense Alliance, Oceans Defense International, and America's Whale Alliance. So when did you create? I mean, I know I've named 3 important ones, like, were they created around the same time? And what was your goal in creating these initiatives?
Well, let me go back a little bit to 1987 when we started the Hunt Saboteurs. Okay, and it wasn't just me. There was a number of us people that went. Now when we went to the first Bighorn. To me, what I'm going to tell you was a big significant move in both the environmental and the animal rights movement or animal liberation movement. It was a big, basically when we went to this bighorn sheep hunt in the desert, we had it open to people to come and join us. There was a core group of us, and we were a mixed bag of long-haired deadheads, vegans to anarchist vegans to urban vegans to animal rights activists who lived in the country. So it was a mix of us. When we started the first Hunt Sab, these other people started coming in from the radical environmental movement. A lot of Earth Firsters came in to these Hunt Sabs with us. And for me, being at that point, I was like animal rights, strict on animal rights. I started hanging with these people, and these people were very smart people. They knew a lot about ecology and a lot about what I call deep ecology. Wow. And I began to listen to them and talk with them and hang with them. And I began to make the connections between both our issues. And within a year, there were a bunch of us animal rights people starting to go into Earth First rendezvous every year. And then at the same time, and Earth First actions, whether it was, forest protection and all that. And then at the same time, when I remember specifically, it was 1987, I think, or 88, 89, where UC Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley, was building an underground laboratory because they were starting to build all their laboratories underground because they were getting raided so much in California.
Wow.
So they started building these underground bunkers. So while they were building it, they had a crane there. And we did a big open protest out there, and some people went and put a banner up in the crane and locked themselves onto the crane. Who are these people that were locking themselves on the crane? They were all people who were out in the forest climbing trees and doing tree sits. So we had there was this kind of melding of the movements where we kind of came together. And whether or not that's still there, at that time it was very strong. And those people helped me become aware of the bigger picture. The oppression of this whole planet. It's and all oppression is the same, whether you do it to another person who looks different than you, or an animal, or how we exploit this planet as a whole, right? It's all the same attitude.
Well,
so when I started connecting all that, I began to see that
you connected the dots, and you saw
right, I was an eco-vegan.
And how important it is, because I don't know if you could just like briefly touch upon it, but I was reading up on your website, I think it was Ocean Defense International, the obvious connection between the ocean and climate change, but can you just kind of briefly explain the connection? Because I guess some people don't know. I mean, I was reading up on it, and I'm not that knowledgeable about environmental issues, but it would be important to explain maybe to viewers.
Okay, well, let's look at it. And it's a great question because as my good friend Paul Watson would say, if the oceans die, we all die. And he is completely correct on that. And if there's anyone who knows anything about ocean ecology and the marine mammals in the oceans, it's Paul Watson. Okay,
so check him out.
He's another great activist, old timer activist who's done a lot of great things. We're friends, and we have mutual respect for each other. I've worked with him on campaigns also. So, but I think if we obviously are killing the oceans, we're overfishing the oceans because people won't stop eating fish. Long story short, oceans are a big carbon sink. Oceans take the carbon, but when there's too much carbon coming in the ocean, which we're spewing out from our cars and our factories and all our lifestyle, the oceans begin to acidify, and then the acidic level in the oceans goes up, and then we start killing all the coral reefs, we start killing all the species. So these connections are all very connected. When you start putting carbon in the atmosphere and start warming the planet and start melting the ice, the ice is melting into the water, desalinates the water, the currents change. And if you look at now I'm just top of my head, I just can't think of the name of the particular current, but I think it's the Gulf Stream, the current that goes up the Atlantic and gives basically warm weather to Europe.
Okay.
So when you start desalinating the water, the warm water sinks, the cool air goes on, the cool water goes to the surface,
Okay.
and then your temperatures change in Europe and you'll get an ice age. Because Europe is at the same latitude as you, where you are and where you live, right? But but it stays reasonably warm in Europe, and that's all because of not the jet stream, but the currents that flow bring the warm water and bring good weather to Europe. Okay, so all these things are being affected. You know, you look, they're talking in 2050 that there's going to be no fish in the ocean. I mean, I mean, really? I hear that stuff and I'm like, really? I mean, is this, I mean, are you out of your freaking minds? I mean, is this what we want to do? I mean, we want to just destroy these oceans and kill them. And when we do, it's going to kill all of us.
I know, it is very scary because, you know, I just watched Seaspiracy. I don't know if you've seen the movie.
I have not yet, mostly because I can't download stuff from where I am with my satellite. But I saw Cowspiracy, but it's on my list.
I find it's a very good film. It's certainly well, you know, shot and everything, and it does show the overfishing. They scrape the whole ocean floor, and they, you know, the bycatch problem. And dolphins and everything, sea turtles. I mean, I thought the plastic garbage patch that we know is in the Pacific Ocean, I thought that was the biggest problem.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's so everywhere.
And why aren't governments jumping on this? You know, like why aren't the alarm bells ringing? You know, like,
because we have two things here.
Yeah.
There's two big reasons for it. Big money. Big money, right? Industrial fishing is huge money. And the fact that I think also on a different, deeper level within our own consciousness, we're a little bit disconnected from the ocean because we're terrestrial beings. So we don't have our empathy doesn't go underwater that far, I guess, for most people. So they don't think about it. Out of sight, out of mind. No problem. I want my fish burger. I mean, really, I mean, they're talking, I mean, what is it, in the last 50 years, 90% of all the large species have been depleted by 90%. I mean, it's crazy. The stats are crazy.
And
it's alarming. It should be, you know, red flags everywhere. This is alarming, but, you know, the oceans are extremely important to the survival of this planet.
Absolutely. I think, isn't it like 80% of the world's oxygen comes from the ocean? Or I don't know if I've got the percentage
most
right.
Of it, yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
no oxygen, like,
no oxygen, we're screwed, right? I mean, yes, the ocean it's part of, just like the Amazon is the lungs of the world, the rainforest, you know, you have the same thing with the oceans on how to, I mean, everything is, if you look on a deep ecologist level, everything is there for a reason, everything works for a reason, and it goes, and then you put in humans, and we do nothing but screw it all up. Because we are the true invasive species, correct? I mean,
the most destructive.
We act.
The most destructive species.
The most destructive. I mean, you know, we are not the only species on Earth. We just act like it.
Yes. And I'm like, we're supposed to be the most intelligent. I really doubt that, because, you know, someone who's intelligent would see the warning signs and revert, you know, like change course. But, you know, it seems like you said, money rules the world. And I just. And even
mind-boggling. It's just,
from a health perspective, fish is like probably the worst thing you could probably eat, you know, like it's got mercury, I mean, toxic, you know, plastic, I mean, like, it's just horrible. And the fact that I don't know what is it going to take, like, so we're talking about climate change and how to at least tackle it successfully. And I'm a fan of Jay Conroy, you know, Cranky Vegan. I'm sure a lot of people know. And he's saying, you know, like, vegans are so focused on changing the demand, right? Which is important. Obviously, we want to inform the public, and so they can make more intelligent choices, better choices. But it's going to take forever that way, right? So he's saying you need to kind of, you know, like, protest the industries, the companies that are making money from this, and try to dismantle them, like bit by bit, so that they cannot continue. But that's a tall order as well. So often we're left as, everyday people going, well, what can I do? I can inform my neighbor, and hopefully he'll stop eating fish or meat. And, so I guess our mindset is more about changing people. What is your thought on that? Like, how do we successfully, try to, revert the climate change that's happening,
So you're asking the $25 million question.
I know. I'm like,
I mean,
how much time do I have, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's I think, though, I'll have to say, even though the outcome may be looking, or the realistic outcome may be looking pretty grim, and I'm a realist. I'm not a person that's going to sugarcoat anything,
No.
I do think that should never, ever stop you from being an activist.
No.
Or doing what you think is right to make change, because it's the right thing to do, and you might as well try. You might as well do the best you can. You may not succeed. I mean, I remember I was talking to Paul Watson again, and he was explaining to me, we'll all kill ourselves, and we'll kill most of the species on this planet, and the planet will recover in 18 million years back to a whole different ecosystem and different animals. And I'm like, well, that's kind of nice, but why? Why do we even have to go that far? Why are we going to destroy everything we have and live on this planet so that it's unlivable, which it could possibly be in the next 50 to 100 years? It's very possible. These things are really grim, scary, realities that we have to face. So that also in itself can motivate you to keep being an activist, because it's the right thing to do. I always say to myself, listen, when I take my last breath in life, I want to know that I did everything I could. I'm not saying that I succeeded in all that, but at least I did something. I did my best to make the world a better place for everyone, for all species.
Yeah.
And I don't lie to myself. I'm not thinking I'm saving the world, but I guess you might as well try.
You're doing your part, and we all need to do our part.
Doing your part is a good part. Yeah. Being part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Right?
Exactly.
Let's be part of the solution. And and a big part of that is joining together. My whole thing, it's unity with the environmental movement, the animal rights movement, with Black Lives Matter, with all the different organizations out there. We may not have to go out and protest with other issues, but we have to understand that these issues are all connected.
Absolutely.
Right? So
yeah.
It's all the same. It's all the same.
And I think that brings me to another point, is that often vegans, I find it funny because I guess we've been vegan for so long that, from the get-go, I knew I was the anomaly in my circle. Mm-hmm. And, I was used to working with non-vegans. Most people were not vegan, right? So, and I speak to my, young vegan activists here in Montreal, and they're like, oh, how do you speak to those people? They're not vegan. And I'm like, well, listen, we live in a society where it's about 2% of the world population that's vegan. So you're going to have to function. And to this point, why, something I really like about Jake, with his weekly podcast, he does mention that we need to work together. And environmentalists and vegans, and these people are smart. They have good strategies. So support them, because it's not because they're not vegan that you can't support them. In that action, they are absolutely right. And you need to support that, because, the world is going to go down in a handbasket otherwise, we can't wait for the world to become vegan to be perfect, there's no such thing, right?
And I think that's, it's another great question, another good point and great question. How are we going to do this? How are we going to?
We have to collaborate.
We need to unite the movement.
Yeah,
we have to collaborate. We have to understand. For instance, if someone's doing a protest against slaughterhouses, an animal rights group is doing, how come I never hear any of them talking to mention about that animal agriculture is some of the top reasons that we have carbon in the atmosphere, tons of carbon in the atmosphere, and we have habitat loss, and we have wildlife depletion. All goes back to big ag, right? To big agriculture. Why aren't these people? Because that message right there should make other people think who don't necessarily. It's easy for. I think that in some ways it's easy for people to deny the individual suffering of animals. It's just I don't see it. I just get my meat in a packet.
Yeah,
or I
don't
order
think
it.
about it.
It's there, and I don't have to think about it. It's easy. I live in bliss. It's all good.
Yeah.
Now, if you start bringing in the other issue, like, hey, but don't you know that when you're eating that cow, you're also eating a wolf, you're eating a coyote, you're also eating a mountain lion, you're eating the habitat, you're eating the rainforest, you're eating all these species that are dying because the rainforest is being cut to grow the food for the cows. And I mean, these connections just go on and on and on. And I think when the animal rights people bring this message out to the public, I think you'll find you might gain a little bit more traction in trying to get people to reduce eating animal products.
Absolutely. And I guess that can bring me to one of my questions. I was, because Anonymous for the Voiceless, when I first heard about them was like a couple years ago. And I liked the fact that they were talking about for the planet, for the animals, and for your health, so all those three aspects are important and advocating to the public, right? Why we're going plant-based, why it's it's the right thing to do. For all those reasons, not just for the animals, because sometimes, some people are, they don't have much of a heart for animals, like for whatever reason, they don't have that empathy. But if you can get them on the environmental front, for those reasons, for the health reasons, because, eating meat is the leading cause of heart disease, right? So if you can try to appeal to that side of them, then, you're winning, right? I mean, it's even more reasons.
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, and speaking for Animals of Voiceless, I don't know. I know I've seen what they do. I've seen videos with their cubes and showing people the slaughterhouses, and that's fine. I mean, I don't necessarily criticize. I criticize some strategies people have, not necessarily with Animals for the Voiceless, or Voiceless for the Animals. But I think that with strategy, but I think that when you start combining these issues, you start seeing the connection, you're going to get more change. However, I did watch a video where Animals for the Voiceless, is it Voiceless
Anonymous
for the
Voiceless.
Anonymous for the Voiceless. Sorry, no offense to, but no. I did see on their Facebook page, the particular woman who was doing the interview, someone asked a question about the connection between the environment and animals, and she basically said the environment was a big distraction. It has nothing to do with going with the animals.
Yeah,
and I can't word the whole thing for myself. You can see it for yourself, but I was sitting there going, really?
What the hell are you saying?
What you're telling me that that the environment is a distraction from the animals? No, the environment and the animals, it's the same issue. It is the same thing, because when we eat domestic animals, we're killing the wildlife. The rainforest is being absolutely destroyed to graze cattle and to raise soybeans to feed cattle. This stuff is connected. You cannot and I saw.
You cannot ignore it. I mean, that's ridiculous.
You can't ignore it. I saw comments where people saying, we need to just be animal rights and forget the environment stuff or the environmentalists. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You just can't be so single issue. You're not going to get anywhere.
I totally agree with you. And that's my point, because when I first discovered them, I thought, okay, those three things, that's great. I support that. And I did join, like, they have Cubes of Truth where you're showing the slaughterhouse footage to the public. But lately I think they graduated and they started being, I guess they got criticism from vegans, like, that are gung-ho and going, stop talking about the environment, it's all about the animals, and people are not going to stay vegan if it's not for the animals. And it's very immature, like, attitude.
It's very immature. It's naive.
It's naive.
It's counterproductive. Listen, I mean, some people. Yeah, and as for me, it's from my views as a vegan and a deep ecologist, right? My belief is we need domestic animals are not native to this planet. They're created by humans. Yeah. And I love my dog. I love my cats. I love all animals. But at the same time, these domestic animals, we have to stop breeding them. We have to breed them out of existence. And that's my deep ecologist part, because cows don't belong out in nature. Sheep don't belong out there. No. They're not native. We need and it's not like, let's just do a mass slaughter. Don't, people out there, listen, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we want to like suddenly cull all the animals. I said, stop breeding them. Let them live out their lives. Stop breeding them. Start introducing wild animals back in, protecting more lands. That's the ultimate thing that I would like to see. I don't think it'll ever happen, or I don't know, but that's what we need to do. We have to, and that's where the animal rights issue comes in with the environment. We have to connect these things, because you can't have one. You can't have one without the other. It doesn't work that way.
Exactly.
You can't.
Well, to all vegans out there, please, we need to collaborate. And, this is what I'm hearing. If you care about animals, you care about life, you care about the planet, you have to embrace all of it, right? So,
Yeah, and don't go up to people and say, if you're environmentalist, you're not vegan, I don't really want to work with you. It's like, just let that part go, work with them, and let people evolve on their own scale. If you go up and just slap them in the face with stuff, some people don't like that, and they're going to
kidding. They become defensive, and it just doesn't go anywhere.
By example.
Exactly. So support that. I guess we talked about it right now, but I mean, any thoughts on like the vegan activists of today? Because you've been at it for so long, and what do you think about the young kids nowadays? I mean, they all follow these, vloggers like James Aspie, Joey Carbstrong, Earthling Ed. Do you have any opinion about what they're doing? I mean, obviously, Earthling Ed, what I appreciate about him is like he's very informed, and he does good advocacy because he brings the knowledge. He has the knowledge, the information, and he often can make people think twice about the way they were raised to think and to perceive animals and the environment. I think he does bring about a lot of good points on the environment, but they're not all equal, I would say. So I don't know. Do you have anything to say about these kind of new day activists? Are they doing the right thing?
Sure, and I do, and I okay, here's the thing. First of all, when I was an activist, we didn't have social media. Sometimes I wish we did have it, because I would love to video some of the stuff with a fancy camera on my phone that I could show people the campaigns we're doing and that kind of stuff. It just was, those days it was old cameras and VHS. I mean, we're old school. Now, when I was locked up and away from 2007 to 2011, a lot changed in the technical world, in the technology. iPhones came out. The first iPhone came out, and social media started in 2009. I was clueless to this stuff. I was locked up, so I didn't see it. So when I came out, there was a huge shock for me. And I was like, where do I fit in now? Because I'm an old school, on the ground, front lines activist. That's what I am. I'm on social media, but I don't really like it. I'm a different generation of people, and I saw this when I was a kid with the generation before me. We all have to begin to accept and understand certain things. But I think when you're an influencer, okay, I think obviously some of these influencers have hundreds of thousands of listeners, and people that follow them, which I don't really understand, but I guess I don't need to be influenced because I've been a vegan for 40 years of my life. So,
but they have a platform, so you hope they use it well.
They have an easy way to learn stuff and get educated and stuff. We had to do it differently when we were kids, right? Or when we were younger. So, I do think there's a place for people to give out information using social media, being whatever the term, being an influencer.
Yeah, you're right. That's the term.
But what it really comes down to is, what are your motivations behind it? Are your motivations because you believe that you want to make change and you're really doing it, but you're not doing it for yourself? Or are you doing it because you also have an ego, you want to be famous, you want to make money? I mean, that's where you start getting into that issue of where the ethics are and where that is. So to be honest with you, I don't follow influencers. I've never listened to any of those guys. For no reason than the fact that I didn't really need to, in my opinion, because I've been doing it for so long. But at the same time, it's where are the motivations going? Are you doing it because you just, you just want to make money? I've seen that where people are putting out to make money and pay for their weddings and do all this stuff. And that's That's
Well,
ethics beyond, that's non-ethical beyond belief.
yeah. It can become like, I think it can start off with the right intentions, but like anything, human is, ego driven. And maybe
Sure.
once you see, oh, your following is growing and growing and people care about what I have to say. So it becomes something else,
And it feels good.
Yeah,
and it feels
probably
good to
they make
them.
money.
They're getting acceptance.
Yeah, and a
There's
lot of
all
them,
different reasons.
yeah, and
There's
a lot
all
of them,
different reasons.
that's the way they earn a living. It becomes their bread and butter. So when your bread and butter is your activism, well, it creates kind of a fine line between what's ethical and what's really, driven by your ego, and
Right.
I mean,
and I've never been paid to be an activist
exactly.
ever in my life.
Yeah, I know.
However, there are people who do get paid, who are paid activists.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But where is that ethic line going to be? Where are you going to stand, and where are you going to put yourself so you're not? It's a selfless job.
It's still selfless.
Are you doing it because you want the attention, or are you doing it because you believe in the issue, or even a bit of both? And when you have that in you, you have to really find that balance, because the ethics can get really shady in there. And
absolutely.
And so I think you just have to be really careful with how
your
you're doing
purpose
things
and
you're doing it. Yeah,
what's your
purpose.
intention? Yeah, exactly.
What's your intention?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the primary focus of this podcast. I started it in 2019, and it was really to educate us foreigners in the West about the dog cat meat trade, because when I first heard about it was through Yulin Dog Meat Festival, and I would say it was early 2018. So I was a little bit late, because some people have known about it for much longer. But it just, I guess it's what made me an activist. It really stirred something up in me and lit a fire in me. And I was all confused because I was looking at social media, and it seemed like no one really knew what was going on, where this came from. And so the podcast, the whole goal was to educate myself and hopefully others in the process. And I have to say, I've learned so much. I feel like I've gone to Dog Cat Meat Trade College or something. At this point,
I'm sorry. Sounds horrible.
I'm sorry. I've interviewed about over 30, interventionists, leaders of nonprofits. So I'm starting to really connect the dots and understand where does it come from, and the different dynamics per country. But I would love to hear, when did you first hear about the dog cat meat trade? Have you known about it for many, many years, or was it through Yulin?
No, I knew that in other countries that dogs and cats were treated as food for, I can't remember how long, but I wasn't really made aware of the Yulin Dog Festival per se until like 2013. I didn't really, I started seeing stuff on social media about it, and I know, like Last Chance for Animals in Los Angeles, who Chris DeRoe is the founder. It's an old friend of mine. I know they've worked on it a lot, so I was always aware of the issues around the dog and the cat meat trade. So
but how do you view this issue in relation to the more like mainstream animal agriculture? Do you feel that animal rights activists should, obviously focus on it with equal time and energy? I mean, I'm asking because being a vegan and being with animal rights activists in my city of Montreal, a lot of people were either not aware of the dog cat meat trade per se, or they're largely misinformed. They don't understand where it's coming from. And a lot of them felt like, well, why should I take this on? Because we slaughter animals here in the West. So why judge a country because they slaughter dogs, And my point to that, or my answer to that, is always, well, they slaughter cows too, right? So this is an extra layer of cruelty. And in my opinion, if we have a chance to remove a category of animals from slaughter, in my lifetime, it's certainly dogs and cats, because dogs and cats for most of the world, they're companion animals. They're not on food. They're not considered food. And I feel like this is something we can concretely, tackle and win. I think, it's a question of time. It's going to take some time in those countries, because some of them It's upheld by a lot of the older generation. So I do feel like as the new generation comes to power, I mean, it will slowly die. It's already dying. But I feel it's super important, and their pain and suffering, like I said, you know, it's unspeakable what they go through.
Horrible. Yeah.
It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you say you love animals, like you should absolutely defend this, you know, like you should be absolutely against it, and not judge people because they want to protect these dogs and cats. And they are not vegan, but they're not it's not like these people see slaughterhouse footage, you know, like they haven't seen that ugly side of the meat industry that they contribute to. But I think honestly, if they would see it, I think they would definitely, you know, become vegan slowly. And many people who started out doing, you know, being a dog, cat, meat trade activist have become vegan because it exposes you to other animal cruelty. So I guess you would agree with that, you know. So we need to.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, there's a few reasons why this issue, the dog and cat meat trade, is so important. And one is obviously, if on a strategic level, it's an easier issue to get across to people because most people, like you said, in different cultures, in our culture also, see cats and dogs as companion animals.
Yeah.
But you're going to have it, you know, you're dealing with different cultures of people in different countries. Although, you know, I've always said that, you know, I'm for the culture of the animals, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was fighting the whaling with the McCall tribe up in Washington for 4 years, people kept saying I was racist and you didn't respect the culture of the Native Americans and stuff. I said, no. I said, that's not it at all.
No.
The whales have been here for 22 million years.
Yeah.
I'm for the culture of the whales. And I don't want them killed. I don't care who's doing it. Whatever culture you come from or whoever it is in the world, I don't care. So, you know, I think that, and in that story about what you were talking about, how people like will work on the dog and meat trade, yet they still eat other animals, farm animals.
Yeah.
And interesting, my wife and I in 2001 were in Australia at the International Whaling Commission meeting where we tried a few years to try and get into that whole thing to change the world. And that, of course, failed completely because it's an absolutely horrible, useless organization with a lot of compromising going on. But we were standing outside in a break. And we had our tags on that said Ocean Defense International on it. So a Japanese whaler came up to us from the Whaling Commission. And he came up to my wife and I and looked at us and said, you know, you can't tell us we can't eat whales because you eat cows and all that. And we go, we don't eat cows. He's like, well, you eat chicken. We don't eat chicken. He's like, well, he goes, and I said, we're vegans. We don't eat any animals. And he goes, and he looks at us and says, you know, out of everyone here, I will listen to you. I won't listen to the others.
Yeah, but
and he walked away. And my wife and I are sitting there going, did that just happen? I mean, it was just it was really interesting.
He
and
could
it was
respect
true.
you,
Right, he understood that we were seeing the whole picture. Now, however, in saying that, I think with people who we need to work together with people on the same issues like the dog cat meat trade. And if people are a little bit different, or maybe don't see the whole picture, that's okay, because the most important issue is to stop. It's a horrible, cruel, and just it's a disgusting practice, and it needs to stop. And people need to get over the whole thing. Well, you eat meat, so you don't really count. Well, I call it bullshit on that. So I think you need to work together, and then allow those people through their own awareness and learning from example from people like you, that like, oh, maybe I am going to stop eating animals now because I see the connection. So I think we just need to keep it pretty simple and not overthink it.
Exactly. Just like we should embrace environmentalists that are not vegan, we should like work with those that are supporting this cause. And I do believe dogs and cats are like gateway animals. They will make you see the sentience in other animals. I mean, if you go to a sanctuary, you'll see the same kind of reaction as your dog and a pig. I mean, like it's just all there, you know. And it can make more people vegan and embrace all animals. I absolutely believe that.
Exactly.
Okay. we're on the same page.
And overall embrace the whole and embrace the whole planet.
Yes, thank you.
That's really what it all comes down to.
I do want to speak about COVID and this global pandemic, because it's had devastating effects, but at the same time, it has brought to light a lot of the critical risks that are prevalent in all animal exploitation, and hopefully it's made its way into the minds of the general population. I mean, it's hard to deny at this point, right? This COVID pandemic, it was believed to originated from a live animal market in Wuhan, China. And through this pandemic, I've actually learned that there's live animal markets in New York State, like 80 live animal markets. I was not aware. So, what were your initial reactions? Do you believe this will lead changes with governments, like governments, tackling live animal markets, putting a ban on them, and realizing that can't continue doing this without these severe consequences, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'd hope it would. You really would hope it would change. I don't know if it will. I will say that the thing about COVID was, I'm not a specialist on pandemics. I mean, I know we've had past pandemics. I know history. I knew there'd eventually be one coming, but this one just suddenly happened. But when it did happen, I immediately began to realize how it was so connected to how we treat the environment, how we treat wildlife as a population. And in some ways, we had it coming. We had it coming because we're destroying habitat. We are taking wildlife out of their natural habitat, putting them in small cages, inducing stress, and therefore they're releasing their diseases, their coronavirus diseases that they have that don't make them sick. And then when they slaughter them live, they're spraying all these the virus all over the place, and people are getting sick and dying. We had it coming. Now, in some ways, obviously, if humans left this planet, the world would thrive. If the world dies, we all die. So, we have to make a choice here. If we want to survive this pandemic and go on, we also have to survive with the planet. We have to stop. We're overpopulated. There's too many people in the world. There's, we're destroying most of the planet. And this is connected. This is connected to wildlife, to animals, how we treat animals. Having said that, we also know that COVID affects minks, right? In fur farms. That's why in Denmark and Sweden, although up there, they exterminated all their mink because there was a COVID variant. And it was a horrible situation. Yeah, but it was a horrible situation. But mink can spread COVID. They're very susceptible to COVID. So they actually think that possibly what happened was that a bat bit a mink and infected the mink with this COVID, and the mink gave it to humans in a mink farm. So here we have all these connections again. But COVID is directly related to our destruction of this planet as a whole. And there's many more coming. There's hundreds of thousands of coronaviruses out there. You just it's
if we don't change our ways, it's gonna kill us. I mean, honestly, it's already killing us.
I mean, I know we're getting to the end of our interview, but yes, it's doom and gloom. Yes, we are killing ourselves. The saddest part of it all is we're taking everything else down with us.
I know.
That is the saddest part.
And we could have been so amazing, right? I mean,
we have potential to be wonderful, amazing creatures. When humans can love and be at all their best, we can be a good species. But I think generally, because of society, capitalism, and all these other issues, we've just become to be an invasive species, a cancer to this planet, however you want to describe it. But it's devastating.
Drew, on that note, are you hopeful that we still have time to reverse course, and that there's hope for the future? After saying that, are you hopeful?
So, not to try and I'm a pessimistic person in general. Okay, I'm a realistic person too. So I look at what's going on right now and the track we're going. The track we're going looks like we're going to hit a brick wall, and we're going to hit it really hard. If not, we're already starting to hit that brick wall, and we're seeing it around the world on every level, from extinction to the climate crisis to all this stuff. Mass starvation, immigration is caused by climate crisis and war and all that. So am I hopeful? I am only hopeful that maybe enough species will survive that this planet will heal quicker than 18 million years. That's my hope.
Yeah, 18 million years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're going to suddenly have. It's hard for me to believe that suddenly humans will become in tune with nature and we'll all live this amazing life.
Hippy dippy, happy.
Because we're not in it. I hope that it will turn that way if we are to stay on this planet.
Yeah.
Obviously, peoples from many, indigenous peoples from all over the world, they obviously lived in a way that was more harmonious with the planet.
Yeah.
Therefore, their impact wasn't as great. But you got to remember, they weren't as many people. And you got to remember, humans have always oppressed. No matter where you come from or who you are, we still have that oppressive nature in us. We've enslaved people, we've killed people, we've have warred with people. It's always been happening. So the only issue that was different is there wasn't as many people then. Now we have 7, almost 8 billion people on the planet.
I know.
Whereas, and even people's way back when made species go extinct too. I mean, you look at the ground sloth in the United States and mammoths, and there's a bunch of species that went extinct because of people. So it's a whole consciousness change.
Yeah.
I just don't know if we have it in us to do it. I just don't know. I think to kind of conclude all this, I think humans generally, as we can maybe, if we kind of relate this down, bring it to a microcosm to our own personal life, a lot of us don't change until we're slapped in the face. Until the issue hits us really hard, like, oh my God, I got to change this. Now, I hope we don't have to do this with the planet, because when ecosystems start crashing so bad that starvation and droughts and wildfires and hurricanes,
it can get worse, as bad as we feel it is right now. Yeah, exactly. It can be so much worse.
So I have hope that the Earth will survive to a point where it will recover. I have some hope for that. But I have a real hard time really believing that we're going to succeed, except I want to tell everyone that doesn't mean don't do anything.
No, can't give up. Can't give up.
Still fight for what's right, because we could win. I'll happily eat my words. If I was wrong saying that I don't have any faith, I'll say I was wrong. I was an idiot. I didn't know what I was saying.
You'd be so happy to say that, right?
Yeah, I'll be like, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, on that note, I think this is great. I mean, I thank you so much. You've been more than generous with your time. I exceeded the time we had planned together. But I thank you so much. You've made one of my dreams come true, honestly, to speak with you.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty amazing. So thank you for everything.
I'm honored to be on your show.
Okay.
I'm honored to be on your show. Thank you.
Is there any where you would like to, draw the attention to our viewers, like any, resources that you would direct them to support,
Well, there's probably a list. I mean, there's a lot of good organizations out there, but I think my only suggestion is find those good organizations that are doing the good ethical work and are there for the cause, not just, it's okay if you're making money being an activist, but are you doing it in an ethical way? And are these organizations doing it in an ethical way?
Yeah.
Are these organizations making decisions that are good, that are not compromising? Right?
And that are impactful, like at the end of the day, are they efficient? Are they doing things that matter and that make change happen, right? So, and
still be on the streets, be on the streets out there when this COVID thing hopefully goes to the point where people are out protesting again, when they do climate change protests, go out and join them. Go out and join, say, one of the most powerful things I remember seeing was back in the 80s when the AIDS pandemic was really getting bad. And, we were getting a lot of these AIDS activists coming in and joining us in the animal rights movement to help us, and to see that kind of unity, connection, and that stuff. That unity it was a beautiful sight. It's always been a beautiful sight to have unity.
So you heard it from Jonathan. Let's unite, let's rally together, let's collaborate, because the planet and us depend on it, and certainly the animals. So thank you, Jonathan. You've been amazing, and we'll continue to follow you and hope that maybe I'll have you on the podcast again.
Yeah, it'd be great. I loved it. Thank you very much, Jade.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
Ciao.